Good morning, everyone. This morning I will give you a summary of the results of a recent Audit Committee questionnaire sent out to Audit Committee chairs of a number of public interest entities. To set the context for the questionnaire was sent out to audit committees all across Europe for the purpose of providing data on audit committees for the European Commission's triennial market monitoring report. The current set of European data is being analysed by the CEAOB, that's the Commission of European Audit Regulators, the main body, and the report itself is due out at some point next year. So the questions are based on requirements for audit committees contained in both the audit regulation and directive, and in its current iteration, the questionnaire tries to investigate the ways in which the requirements were practically applied. We've analysed the data at an Irish level and the results of which I will share with you today. I'd like to thank again all of the chairs that completed the questionnaire for the current cycle. The questionnaire itself is quite detailed. There are a number of different sections, but it does give us a good picture of the state of play of how audit committees are fulfilling the requirements of both the audit regulation and directive. So, as Lisa mentioned, our European Commission public consultation launched Q4 of 2021 around strengthening the quality of corporate reporting and its enforcement. The public consultation asked for comment on the functioning of company boards, audit committees, and views on how they could improve the functioning. While there's no specific timelines, as Lisa mentioned, there are discussions around potential improvements that could be made to the audit regulation and directive. So in this context, I would pose the following questions, and I'd ask you to get out your phones just to, they're up on Slido. So the questions are, do you think the rules around the provision of non-audit services are set at an appropriate level? The second question relates to the responsibilities of audit committees. Are the current responsibilities assigned to audit committees around monitoring of the various processes, financial reporting, internal controls related to financial reporting, statutory audit, independence, auditor selection, are they overly burdensome for audit committees? The last question relates to the level of supervision of audit committees, and it may be like asking a turkey to vote for Christmas, but would you like to see more interaction and or supervision of audit committees from regulators? So we'll return to these questions throughout the presentation as we go through the different sections. The questionnaire was broken into the following sections: audit committee composition and skills, interactions with the board, independence including prior approval of permitted non-audit services, the auditor selection process, oversight of the audit function, oversight of the financial reporting process, and finally oversight of internal quality control and risk management systems. You'd be very glad to know I will not go through all of the results of every section. For example, I certainly won't cover auditor selection process as there was only a small number of responses to that. I will go through some of the common trends that arose from the results. So if we start with audit composition and skills, audit committee composition and skills, the questionnaire responses were all from audit committee chairs of public interest entities, and the requirements relate specifically to public interest entities. The entities were within a broad range of industries and also varied greatly in terms of size. Half of the audit committees in the response population had 3 members within their audit committee, with 4 and 5 member groupings making up the rest. What isn't surprising is the level of expertise within audit committee members, with it being reported that 66% had financial reporting experience, 53% had audit experience, and 69% had industry experience. Again, no surprise in the degree of interaction with the board and the number of meetings held during the year. 72% of respondents stated that they held meetings with the board 4 or more times, and this compared with 62% in the previous European survey conducted. In relation to internal functioning, I think what's interesting in this response was the level of time spent on audit-specific matters. And this really shows the broad remit that audit committees have outside of audit itself. 39% stated that they spent less than a quarter of audit committee time on audit-related matters, and a further 39% stated that they spent less than 50% on audit-related matters. So what were the other areas that the audit committee was focused on? Well, 100% said that the responses reported that they spent time on the preparation of financial statements, which would be a surprise. 94% indicating that some of their time was allocated to risk management, analysis and internal controls. So both of these appear to be, we know that they are core responsibilities of the audit committee. A large number also confirmed that resources were also allocated to regulatory compliance, and a majority also indicating that cybersecurity was also on their agendas. So moving on to the provision of non-audit service, I'll go back maybe just to the Slido poll first, and we'll just get see what the response rate was on that. So do you think the rules around the provision of non-audit services are set at an appropriate level? So the NAS rules are well balanced. We have that at 56%. 24% the rules are overly restrictive, and 20% saying the rules could be further strengthened. So there's a clear majority there in that they are well balanced. But again, we're talking about a pie population, and independence is to the fore there. So I think there's no great surprise in the results there. So if we move back to the slides, what were the related results of the questionnaire? 44% of audit committees did not assess NAS proposals, or put another way, 0 proposals were received. Some of the reasons for this were that the entity had very restrictive non-audit service policies, or the non-audit service policies were only approved on an exceptions basis. 33% of entities received between 1 and 3 proposals for non-audit services, and 22% received 7 or more than 7 proposals for non-audit services. So the other trends that we saw for non-audit services were around 90% of the companies did not have non-audit services in excess of 20% of audit fees. 77% of audit committees reviewed the non-audit service cap, and that cap being the requirement that the total fees for non-audit services be limited to no more than 70% of the average of audit fees paid in the last consecutive 3 years. 3 of the companies put in a lower cap of 40%, with independence being cited as the main reason for having a cap in place for non-audit services. And by that I mean a cap that is lower than the required 70% cap. In terms of oversight and communication with the auditor, 67% of audit committees met with their auditor 4 or more times during the period, which shows a good deal of interaction between the auditor and the audit committee. Here in the next slide, we see the number of meetings with the auditor without management. And I think what's interesting here is not the 39% of audit committees met with the auditor once in the year, it's more than 61% that met with the auditor 2 or more times during the year. So, is that indicative of a more assessment of management by the auditor? I just thought it was interesting. Moving on to how the auditor was assessed by the audit committee. 72% of audit committees received a copy of IAASA's inspection report. Now, if we compare that to just 22%, for the last questionnaire, that was only individual inspection reports that would have been available to audit committees at that time. We didn't really start the publication of our firm-wide report really until 2020. There appears to be open communication with the auditor on the implementation of recommendations, and by recommendations I mean those that are set out in the inspection reports, where findings are identified from a firm-wide or an overall QC perspective, or from individual inspection perspectives. The audit committee looked for information on how the findings were remediated. 61% of audit committees made a formal assessment of audit quality and used some or all of the following metrics in their assessment. So they looked at quality of communications with the auditor, technical expertise displayed by the audit team, the assessment of the engagement team, the amount of time spent by the statutory audit partner or senior audit management on the audit, the use of technology, degree of auditor challenge, And the amount of time, I think, which is again interesting and shows that the focus of the audit committee, the amount of time spent by the statutory audit by the EQCR or the engagement quality control partner. So in terms of how the audit committee monitored the effectiveness of the entity's internal control and risk management systems, and where applicable, the internal audit function, the most common procedures employed were interviews, meetings with the heads of function, reviews of internal audit reports, discussions with the auditor, and commissioning external consultant reviews. So I think I'd like to move back to the Slido screen just at this point to look at, I see the responses for the last two questions. So the first question there, the current responsibilities assigned to audit committees around that whole list of tasks. There's a clear answer there. No audit committees have sufficient time around resources to perform the responsibilities assigned. So I think there's a feeling there that audit committees are up for it. But I suppose it is something that the Commission would need to be cognizant of when they're looking at adding additional potential burdens to audit committee to their workload if there is any revision to the audit directive or regulation. For the the third and final question there, would you like to see more interaction and/or supervision with audit committees? So we can see there very positive, 47% saying more interaction with regulators. Surprisingly, more with 40%, which is higher than I expected, seeing more interaction and supervision from regulators. And then we have quite a small number there, no interaction or supervision of audit committees at 10%, and more supervision by regulators. So I think that is quite heartening to see that in terms of today's event is something that we're trying to increase the interaction with audit committees, and also we would certainly engage with audit committee chairs through the AQU inspection process as well. Okay, moving back to the slides again. The current responsibilities of the assigned to audit committees around monitoring, I've covered. What are the findings in relation to the questionnaire? Audit committee composition. We continue to see high levels of expertise and experience within audit committees. Audit committee members, I think this reflects the role of and responsibilities assigned to audit committees at present. The frequency of meetings, again, there's no magic number for this. It's greatly dependent on the size and complexity of the entity, with 5 meetings per year appearing to be the most popular. Audit committees have a wide-ranging set of responsibilities. At most, 40% of time is being spent on audit-related matters, which again I think is interesting. In terms of non-audit services, we are seeing low levels of non-audit service proposals going to the audit committee. I think that's also very reflective of the population that we'd sampled. We are talking about public entities, and there are strict requirements around independence. High levels of audit interaction, with nearly 70% of respondents meeting their audit 4 or more times during the year. I think this is significant if we look back to the previous European survey, where just over 40% of the respondents stated that they met with the auditor 4 or more times during the year. So as I said at the beginning of this presentation, it would be interesting to see what changes come about, when they will come about, if they come about in relation to the audit regulation and directive next year or the year after, as a result of the public consultation that Lisa talked about and this pan-European questionnaire. We'll have to wait and see. So I'm happy to take questions at this point. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll start maybe just with 1 or 2 Slido questions, and we'll go back to the floor then. So first one there, were there any questions on ESG sustainability? Would like to understand audit committee's challenges, findings on these topics. So in relation to the questionnaire itself, certainly not. It's a pan-European questionnaire. And it was very much driven by what was set out in the requirements of the regulation and directive. So open-ended questions like that, or I suppose more topical questions would be beyond that. But I think you're in a good spot today to hear the challenges that audit committees will be facing on ESG or sustainability. Do any other countries supervise audit committees? Absolutely, yes, they do. I suppose from a European context, a survey was done. Roughly around 50% of audit committees in Europe are directly monitored by one regulator or another. You know, sometimes it might be the audit regulator, so it might be the financial reporting regulator. And I suppose what we do see, or what I saw, was that, for example, here the audit committee questionnaire was very much voluntary. In some member states, it was issued, and all audit committees had to complete it. So there is varying degrees of supervision. There are a number of member states that don't have direct supervision as well. But again, that's I suppose a question for those individual member states. Are there any requirements regarding skill sets for audit committees? Really, the main skill set would be around, or what is disclosed or required is in the directive. They do have specific requirements around audit expertise and financial reporting expertise, but nothing very onerous. But there is a general requirement in the directive.